Let's get some perspective now. We speak to crime expert and CEO of IRS Forensic Investigations, Chad Thomas. Chad, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So yesterday we got to hear from IPID about what is, said to be happening as far as some of the task teams are concerned in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Today, much focus on the CIT, the CIT task team led by Dina Govender, one would say. And then earlier on in the day, we're listening to a father who's adamant that his son was murdered by police under the guise of a legitimate police operation, while he says that, some are saying his son was a criminal, but he is disputing this particular, fact. What are your impressions on what we've heard so far? Quite disturbing coming out of the province of KwaZulu-Natal.
Good evening to you and good evening to the viewers. Of course, it's disturbing. Anything that talks to the infiltration or the compromise of police officers is disturbing. And we don't see this just playing out in KwaZulu-Natal. We've seen it playing out in Gauteng. We've seen it playing out in the Eastern Cape and very, very much within the Western Cape on the Cape Flats. The fact that gangsterism goes hand in hand with organised crime, whether it's the trafficking narcotics, whether it's the trafficking in human beings, whether it's other types of organised crime like extortion, has been around for a long time. The fact that there's police officers complicit is nothing new. If one listens to what was said by Len John yesterday from IPID and what was said today by retired Captain Houston gave some credence to what was said by Len John yesterday in respect of some killings that are suspicious and looks as if police officers may have been compromised during the bidding of rival gangs. We must understand that these are not extrajudicial killings in the true sense of the terminology. And what Len John went to great extents yesterday to try push as a narrative was that there are 3 units within the KwaZulu-Natal policing structures that are being used for extrajudicial killings. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe there are compromised police officers. Those compromised police officers are being used by underworld elements, but they make up a fraction of the policing officers that are in these units that are actually working towards combating crime through disruption, infiltration, and dismantling of these particular crime syndicates.
And what picture emerges for you and from the work that you've done in the crime space, for example, because towards the end, he speaks about what appears to be a network. You've just succinctly put it there as well. When he talks about tow trucking, for example, he speaks about the trucking industry. He then speaks about ambulances, and he also then goes as far as saying that there's even now the guise of adding security companies to this particular picture. When you look at some of the analysis that you've done, what seems to be appearing in that picture, in that sense?
It's very interesting. There's always been wars between rival tow truck companies, especially with insured cars, because they know there's a guaranteed payday. So when they would get to the scene of an accident, there would invariably be an argument as to who got there first. It would turn violent. And that industry started to attract very bad actors. Just like there was insurance for the vehicle and the fighter of the vehicle, we then saw various owners of tow truck companies in South Africa establishing ambulance services. And the same scenario would play out at an accident scene. Because people have medical insurance or medical aid, there would be a fight over which ambulance would get to take those patients to the hospital, because it would be, again, a guaranteed payday, and again, attract bad actors. These bad actors then became friends or associates with police officers, metro police officers, because they would always be at the same scene. And that almost gave them a free ride, that if there was a roadblock, they could drive through it. If there was a scene, they could use the emergency lights. And hence the theory came about, the hypothesis that these taxis, tow trucks, as well as ambulances, were being used to transport illicit substances such as narcotics and, of course, firearms. There's a lot of credence given to that. When one saw the wars that played out in Phoenix, which is north of Durban, between 2021, 2022, 2023, a lot of the people that were involved in that violence and were killed were rival tow truck drivers, and it was linked to the narcotics trade. We've seen that play out again in Wentworth, which is south of Durban. So the fact that there's this nexus and the symbiotic relationship between bad actors, it's there. Organized crime is there. Organized crime overlaps all types of crime. You'll see the same criminals that are involved in ATM bombings will be used in CIT heists, will be used in kidnap for ransom, will be used in extortion. Just like we saw the taxi drivers starting renting out their Izinkabi because they would make peace somewhere along the line. And my last point, you mentioned security companies. A lot of security companies were bought up by bad actors simply because those security companies historically had firearms and they had code of bodies, and it gave access to legitimate weapons that could be used by bad actors. And again, using branded vehicles, they could go through roadblocks, they could go into areas they wouldn't normally be able to go into without any hindrance from the police.
And Chad, I know that yesterday Len John was asked these questions about, why IPID hasn't closed some of the investigations. And he seemed to have been stumbling as far as the answers are concerned. But from your vantage point, why haven't some of these cases been closed, especially if, for example, IPID is making these allegations and painting this picture as far as the police officers are concerned? Is there a complication we are not seeing?
Oh, yes, guaranteed. Once again, there was a deficit of leadership within IPID. We see the head of IDAX investigations, Matthew Sissoko, was previously the head of investigations at IPID. Everybody fishes from the same pond. And we saw how he testified that he wasn't really in control of the investigations at IDAC. And I'm sure much of the same happened when he was at IPID. IPID at a stage was also rudderless because their leader at the time, Robert McBride, was suspended for quite a period. When one looks at the size of IPID, there is no way they can effectively investigate a police service that comprises over 170,000 members. They don't have the numbers, they don't have the resources, they don't have the capacity. And also the MOU that they recently signed with the DPCI judge comes very late in the day. One must remember that the Office of the DPCI judge was established to investigate Hawks members accused of serious crimes such as corruption, murder, whereas IPID looked towards traffic departments, national traffic departments, metropolitan police departments, the South African Police Service. IPID has been woefully incapacitated. Their statistics have spoken for themselves. Their statistics have been incredibly poor over the last few years. But the fact that they haven't been working closely with the Office of the DPCI judge or closely with the Office of the Inspector General of Intelligence is very telling. And that's why you've got a private member's bill before Parliament to establish a Chapter 9 super anti-corruption agency. That is why our acting Minister of Police, when he wore the cap as the head of the Anti-Corruption Commission, also put forward this Chapter 9 super corruption agency, because these small agencies are not up to the massive job of trying to root out the rot that exists within our policing structures in South Africa.
All right, let's see then what comes out. As far as the stream is concerned, who else are we still going to be hearing from? Appreciate your time. Crime expert and CEO of IRS Forensic Investigations, Chad Thomas.